At the pharmacy, I paid $3 for an elderly man's insulin. He gripped my wrist tight. After your son leaves tonight, don't touch the snow outside your home. Your life depends on it. How did he know my son was coming? How did he know I even had a son? 3 days later, I understood. Footprints circling my house, every window checked. Someone had been there while I slept. And when I discovered who sent them, my entire world collapsed. Good day, everyone. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time, make sure to subscribe and like the video and tell us where you're from in the comments. Just a reminder, this story has been adapted with creative elements for entertainment and teaching purposes. Any similarities to actual names or places are entirely coincidental, but the underlying message is very real. My name is Patricia Caldwell, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived in Madison, Wisconsin my entire life, raised my son, here taught second grade for 35 years, and buried my husband James 4 years ago. I thought I knew this quiet neighborhood, this predictable life. I thought I understood the rhythm of small-town winters and the comfort of familiar faces. I was wrong. 3 days before my life was put in danger, I was standing in line at Riverside Pharmacy on a frigid December afternoon, clutching a box of cold medicine and watching the snow begin to fall outside. It was December 18th, around 3:45 p.m. The weather forecast had been warning about a blizzard for days, the kind that shuts down schools and makes the evening news. I wanted to stock up before it hit. The pharmacy smelled like disinfectant and cinnamon candles, a strange combination that somehow felt festive and clinical at the same time. A tinny version of Jingle Bells played over the speakers. Outside, the snow was falling faster now, coating the parked cars in white. The man in front of me was elderly, maybe 75, with a worn army jacket and hands that trembled slightly as he set down a small box of insulin on the counter. His face was weathered and lined. There was something about him that seemed both fragile and resilient. Lauren, the young pharmacist, rang it up. "That'll be $28.25, Mr. Turner." He fumbled with his wallet, pulling out crumpled bills and loose change. His face tightened as he counted. Once, twice. His shoulders sagged. "I've only got 25, he said quietly. Lauren hesitated, her expression sympathetic but helpless. "I'm sorry, Mr. Turner. I can't adjust the price." "I'll cover it," I heard myself say. Both of them turned to look at me. I stepped forward and pulled a $5 bill from my wallet. "Please, it's no trouble." Lauren smiled and took the money. The old man, Mr. Turner, stared at me for a long moment. There was something in his gaze I couldn't quite place. Recognition, maybe, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. Then he nodded once. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough but steady. "You're a good woman." Lauren rang up the transaction, and I paid for my cold medicine as well. I expected Mr. Turner to leave to shuffle out into the snow with his insulin, but he didn't. He lingered near the door, waiting, watching. As I turned to go, he stepped directly into my path. "Ma'am," he said quietly. I stopped clutching my pharmacy bag. He leaned in closer, and I caught the faint scent of old spice and tobacco. His hand reached out, and suddenly his fingers were wrapped around my wrist. Not rough, but firm. Urgent. "After your son leaves tonight," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Don't touch the snow outside your home." I blinked, startled. "Excuse me." His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. There was no confusion in them, only certainty. "Your life depends on it." Before I could respond, he released my wrist, turned, and pushed open the pharmacy door. A gust of cold wind rushed in, and he disappeared into the swirling snow. The bell above the door chimed softly. I stood there, frozen, staring at the empty doorway. My wrist still tingled where he'd gripped it. "Mrs. Caldwell." Lauren's voice pulled me back. She was watching me with concern. "Are you okay?" Yes, I'm fine." I cleared my throat. "Who was that man?" Lauren shrugged. "Mr. Turner, Edwin Turner. He's a regular here. Comes in for his insulin every month. A little eccentric, but harmless. He's a veteran, I think. Vietnam, maybe. Keeps to himself, mostly. Lives alone somewhere on the east side. I nodded slowly, but my heart was still racing. Did he say something to you? Lauren asked gently. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell her, but what would I say that a strange old man had warned me not to touch snow, that he'd somehow known my son was coming over tonight? It sounded absurd. Just thanked me, I lied, forcing a smile. She smiled back. That was really kind of you, by the way. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out into the cold. The wind hit me immediately, sharp and biting. Snowflakes stung my cheeks. I hurried to my car, fumbling with my keys, and climbed inside. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. I sat there for a moment, letting the heater warm my frozen fingers, watching the snow pile up on the windshield. After your son leaves tonight, don't touch the snow outside your home. Your life depends on it. I told myself it was nothing. Just an old man confused, maybe on too much medication. Maybe he'd mix me up with someone else. But as I pulled out of the parking lot and drove home through the falling snow, his words kept echoing in my mind over and over. How did he know Andrew was coming over tonight? How did he know I even had a son? By the time I pulled into my driveway on Kendall Avenue, the snow was falling harder. The house looked warm and inviting, the porch light casting a soft glow over the front steps. I grabbed my pharmacy bag and hurried inside, shaking the snow off my coat. I made myself a cup of tea, turned on the evening news, and tried to push Edwin Turner's strange warning out of my mind. But I couldn't. At 6:45 p.m., I heard the crunch of tires on snow. I looked out the window and saw Andrew's silver sedan pulling into the driveway. My son, 38 years old, a real estate agent here in Madison. He'd been through a rough couple of years, a messy divorce 2 years ago that left him quieter, more withdrawn. But he still stopped by once or twice a week to check on me. I opened the door before he could knock. Andrew, I wasn't expecting you tonight. He stepped inside, brushing snow off his shoulders. His face was tense, his jaw tight. Hey, Mom, I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd stop by before the storm gets worse. Come in, come in. I'll make you some coffee. He followed me into the kitchen, but he didn't sit down. He stood by the window, staring out at the driveway. Mom, you should let me shovel the driveway before I go. I glanced outside. The snow was still coming down steadily. Andrew, it's still snowing. There's no point in shoveling now. It'll just pile up again. I know, but... He turned to face me, his expression almost urgent. I'll do it now. It'll only take 10 minutes. I don't want you slipping tomorrow morning. I laughed softly. Honey, I'm not going anywhere tomorrow. The forecast says the blizzard will last through the night. I'll shovel in the morning when it stops. His face darkened. Mom, I'm here now. Let me do it. There was an edge to his voice that made me pause. I set down my tea and studied him. Andrew, what's going on? You're acting strange. I'm not acting strange. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I just want to help, okay? Is that so wrong? No, of course not, but it doesn't make sense to shovel while it's still snowing. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Desperation. Maybe anger. Then he looked away. Fine, whatever. He grabbed his coat and headed toward the door. Andrew, wait. But he didn't stop. He paused at the door and turned back, his voice calmer, but still tense. Who's checking on you, Mom, or the Andersons still around? I blinked, confused. The Andersons. They're in Florida for the winter. Why? He nodded slowly. Just wondering. You're here alone a lot. I'm fine, Andrew. He forced a smile. Okay. Lock the doors tonight, all right. With the storm, you never know. And then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click. I stood there in the hallway listening to his car pull out of the driveway. Something about that visit felt wrong. The insistence on shoveling, the questions about the neighbors, the desperation in his voice. I walked back to the kitchen and looked out at the untouched snow in the driveway. Edwin's words came back to me quieter this time, but no less unsettling. After your son leaves tonight, don't touch the snow. I didn't understand it, but I listened. I locked the front door, checked the windows, and went to bed. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing everything in silence. I woke at 7 the next morning to silence. Not the kind of silence you get on an ordinary winter day, but the deep, muffled quiet that comes after a blizzard. The storm had stopped sometime during the night, and the world outside looked like it had been wrapped in cotton. I made my coffee and stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the backyard. The snow was pristine, untouched, glowing faintly in the early light. It was beautiful. For a moment, I forgot about Andrew's strange visit. I forgot about the old man at the pharmacy and his cryptic warning. I just stood there, warming my hands on my mug, watching the snow. Then I saw them. Footprints. Dark impressions cutting across the white expanse of my yard, leading from the side gate toward the house. My breath caught. I set down my coffee and moved closer to the window, pressing my face against the cold glass. The prints were large, bigger than mine, bigger than Andrew's. They led directly to the house, looping around the perimeter like someone had been circling it. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside onto the front porch. The cold hit me instantly, sharp and biting. My breath came out in clouds. I walked carefully down the steps and into the driveway, following the trail. The footprints started at the gate on the left side of the house. They moved along the fence line, then turned sharply toward the house. I followed them, my heart pounding. The prints stopped beneath the living room window. Whoever it was had stood there for some time. The snow was packed down, trampled. I looked up at the window. The frame was undisturbed, the lock still secure. I kept walking. The footprints continued around the back of the house, stopping at every window, the dining room, the guest bedroom. Each time the same pattern, prints in the snow, packed down beneath the sill, as if someone had been testing each window, checking to see if it was locked. My hands were shaking now, and it wasn't from the cold. I reached the back of the house where my bedroom window faced the yard. The footprints stopped here, too. But this time, something was different. I stepped closer, my boots crunching in the snow. There were scratches on the window frame, fresh ones. Thin, deliberate lines where something, maybe a knife, maybe a screwdriver, had been wedged into the gap between the frame and the sill. Someone had tried to pry it open. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. My bedroom, the window 10 feet from where I'd been sleeping. I looked down at the footprints again. They were deep, clear, methodical. Whoever had made them had taken their time. They'd circled my entire house, checking every entry point, looking for a way in, and they'd almost found one. I turned and hurried back toward the front door, my breath coming in short gasps. My mind was spinning. Who would do this? Why? And then Edwin's words came rushing back. After your son leaves tonight, don't touch the snow outside your home. Your life depends on it. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known this was going to happen. If I'd come out here last night to shovel the driveway like Andrew wanted, I would have destroyed the evidence. The footprints would be gone. No one would believe me. I stood on my front porch, staring out at the yard, at the trail of prints that circled my home like a predator stalking prey. Someone had been here. Someone had tried to get inside while I was sleeping. And if that window hadn't been locked, if I'd been just a little less careful, I didn't let myself finish the thought. I turned and went back inside, locking the door behind me. My hands were still shaking as I picked up the phone. I needed to call the police. Right now. Within 20 minutes of my 911 call, a Madison police patrol car pulled up in front of my house. 2 men stepped out, one older, broad-shouldered in a dark coat and badge clipped to his belt. The other younger, in uniform, carrying a camera and evidence kit. The older man approached, first his expression calm, but serious. Mrs. Caldwell, I'm Detective James Harrison. This is Officer Kevin Walsh. We're here about the footprints you reported. I nodded, wrapping my coat tighter around me. Thank you for coming so quickly. Harrison's eyes moved past me, scanning the yard. Show me where you found them. I led them around the side of the house, pointing out the trail of prints in the snow. Harrison crouched down near the first set, studying them closely. Officer Walsh took photographs documenting each step. These are fresh, Harrison said, his voice low. Made sometime last night after the snow stopped, probably around midnight. He stood and followed the trail, walking slowly, methodically. I followed a few steps behind my arms, crossed tightly against the cold. When we reached the back of the house, Harrison stopped at my bedroom window. He knelt down, examining the scratches on the frame. This was attempted entry, he said, glancing up at me. Whoever this was, they tried to pry the window open. You're lucky it held." Officer Walsh leaned in closer. Professional job, clean marks. He knew what he was doing. Harrison stood and brushed the snow off his knees. Based on the depth of these prints, I'd estimate this person weighs around 200 pounds. Size 13 boots. Male, most likely. And he took his time. This wasn't random. I felt my stomach tighten. "Random, what do you mean?" Harrison turned to face me, his expression grave. "Mrs. Caldwell, whoever came here last night, was conducting reconnaissance. He checked every window, every door. He was looking for a way in. This was planned." I swallowed hard. "But I don't understand. Why would anyone—" "That's what we're going to find out," Harrison said. "Do you have any disputes with anyone, neighbors, family, former colleagues, anyone who might have a reason to target you?" I shook my head. "No, I'm nobody, just a retired second-grade teacher. I live alone, I keep to myself." Harrison nodded slowly, but his eyes stayed sharp. "What about family? Do you have children?" "A son, Andrew. He lives here in Madison. He stopped by last night, actually, before the storm got bad." "Did he stay long?" "Maybe 20 minutes. He wanted to shovel the driveway, but I told him not to. The snow was still falling." Harrison exchanged a glance with Officer Walsh. "Did he seem upset? Agitated?" I hesitated. He was insistent, more than usual. But Andrew's been through a rough time lately. Divorce, work, stress. I didn't think much of it. Harrison didn't respond right away. He looked back at the footprints, then at the window. "Mrs. Caldwell, this person will come back. They didn't get what they wanted last night, and people like this don't give up easily. We need to move fast." A chill ran down my spine. "What do I do?" "First, we need to find out who this is," Harrison said. "Do any of your neighbors have security cameras?" I thought for a moment. Linda Patterson. She lives across the street. She installed a camera system last year after someone broke into her car." Harrison nodded. "Let's go talk to her." He gestured toward the street, and the three of us walked across the snow-covered road toward Linda's house. Linda Patterson's living room was warm and cluttered, filled with knitted blankets, family photos, and the faint smell of cinnamon. She was a retired nurse, 62, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been my neighbor for over a decade, and we'd waved to each other across the street more times than I could count. When Harrison explained why we were there, Linda didn't hesitate. "Of course. Come in. Let me pull up the footage." She led us to a small desk in the corner where her security monitor sat. Officer Walsh stood behind her notebook in hand. Harrison leaned in close, his arms crossed. I stood off to the side, my heart pounding. Linda tapped a few keys on the keyboard. "My camera faces the street. It covers most of your driveway, Patricia. What time should I start?" "Midnight," Harrison said. "Around there." Linda scrolled through the timestamp. The screen showed a grainy black and white view of Kendall Avenue streetlights, casting pale pools of light on the snow. For a few moments, nothing moved. Then at 11:52 p.m., a dark sedan rolled slowly into the frame. "There," Harrison said. Linda froze the image. The car was a mid-sized sedan, dark, maybe black or navy, with no headlights on. It crept forward and stopped directly in front of my house. My breath caught. "Play it," Harrison said. Linda pressed play. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Even on the grainy footage, I could see he was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He moved with purpose, walking toward my side gate without hesitation. "He knows where he's going," Officer Walsh muttered. The man disappeared from the camera's view. For 8 minutes, nothing happened. The car sat there, engine off, silent and waiting. Then at exactly 12 a.m., the man reappeared. He walked back to the car with the same steady pace, climbed in, and drove away, still no headlights. Linda paused the footage just as the car turned the corner. "Can you zoom in on the license plate?" Harrison asked. Linda adjusted the image, zooming in on the rear of the sedan. The plate was partially visible, WI7K2. The rest was obscured by snow and shadow, but there was something else. "Look at the bumper," Officer Walsh said, pointing. I squinted at the screen. There, just above the license plate, was a small logo, a rental car company sticker. Rental, Harrison said. He didn't use his own vehicle. Smart. He pulled out his phone and took several photos of the screen, the car, the partial plate, the timestamp. Linda printed a still image from the footage and handed it to him. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson," Harrison said. "This is exactly what we needed." Linda glanced at me, her face pale. "Patricia, do you have any idea who that could be?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "No, I've never seen that car before." Harrison tucked the photo into his coat pocket. "We'll run this plate through the system. If it's a rental, we'll track down who leased it. We'll find out who he is." He looked at me, his expression firm. "Mrs. Caldwell, I need you to stay somewhere else tonight. A friend's house, a hotel, anywhere but here. Until we identify this person, you're not safe." I nodded, unable to speak. Someone had been outside my house. Someone had tried to get in. And now we had proof. By noon, I was sitting in Linda's guest room, staring at my phone, waiting for news. Harrison had told me to stay put, to keep my doors locked, and not to go back to my house until he called. Linda brought me tea and sat with me for a while, but eventually she had errands to run. I was alone when my phone rang. "Mrs. Caldwell, it's Detective Harrison." His voice was calm but urgent. "We've identified him." I sat up straight, gripping the phone. "Who is he?" "His name is Vincent Drake. 42 years old, ex-military, dishonorable discharge. He's got a record going back 20 years. Violent incidents, intimidation, serious trouble with the law. He's what we call a professional problem solver. Someone hires him to handle situations they don't want to get their hands dirty with." My stomach turned. "You mean someone paid him to break into your house, to cause you harm?" "Yes." Harrison's voice was firm. "Mrs. Caldwell, this wasn't a random burglary. Drake doesn't work alone. He doesn't act without orders. Someone hired him. Someone targeted you." I felt the room tilt. "But who I don't have enemies. I don't understand." "We're going to find out," Harrison said. We tracked the rental car to a motel on East Washington Avenue, Parkway Motel. He checked in 3 days ago under a fake name, paid cash. We're moving on him now. "Now?" "Yes. I'll call you when we have him in custody." The line went dead. I sat there in Linda's guest room holding the phone, my hands shaking. Someone had hired a man to hurt me, to make sure I was out of the picture, and I had no idea who it could be. The hours crawled by. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. I kept replaying the footage in my mind, the dark sedan, the man walking toward my house, the 8 minutes he'd spent circling it like a predator. At 4:45 p.m., Harrison called again. "We have him." I exhaled a shaky breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "You arrested him?" "Yes, we found him at the motel. He resisted briefly, but we took him into custody without incident. We also recovered evidence from his room, a duffel bag containing gloves, pry tools, and other equipment. He's being processed now. Did he say anything? Did he tell you who hired him?" There was a pause. "Not yet, but we're working on it. These guys don't talk easily, but we have leverage. The evidence ties him directly to your property. He's looking at serious time. We'll get him to talk." I closed my eyes, relief and fear washing over me in equal measure. "Thank you, Detective. Mrs. Caldwell, I need you to think carefully. Is there anyone at all who might want to hurt you? An ex-colleague, a neighbor, a family member with a grudge?" I thought about it. I thought hard. But no matter how many times I turned it over in my mind, I couldn't come up with a single name. "No," I whispered. "I can't think of anyone." But even as I said it, a cold feeling settled in my chest. Someone wanted me gone, and I had no idea who. At 6:30 that evening, there was a knock on Linda's front door. I opened it to find Detective Harrison standing on the porch, his coat dusted with fresh snow. His expression was serious. "Mrs. Caldwell, may I come in?" I stepped aside and led him into the living room. Linda had gone upstairs to give us privacy. Harrison sat down across from me, his hands folded in his lap. "Drake is cooperating," he said without preamble. I felt my breath catch. "He is?" Harrison nodded. He lawyered up within an hour, but his attorney advised him to cooperate. With the evidence, we have the footage, the tools, the rental car he's looking at, 15 to 20 years minimum. His best chance at a reduced sentence is to tell us who hired him. And did he? Harrison leaned forward. Yes, he was hired. Paid in cash up front with a promise of more once the job was done. His instructions were clear, make it look like a natural accident. Wait until you were alone. No witnesses, no evidence. I felt sick. An accident. A fall on the ice, a slip in the snow, something that wouldn't raise suspicion. The footprints weren't supposed to be there. The snow was supposed to stop earlier that night, but the storm lasted longer than expected. That's why he left prints. I thought back to Andrew's insistence on shoveling the driveway. If I had gone outside that night, if I had walked around the yard clearing snow, I would have destroyed every trace of those footprints. No one would have believed me. There would have been no evidence. No investigation. Harrison was watching me closely. You're realizing it now, aren't you? I nodded slowly, my throat tight. If I'd shoveled, if I'd done what... I stopped myself. Harrison didn't press. We're tracing the money, he said. Drake was paid through a series of transfers, cash deposits, online payments, burner accounts. It's complicated, but we're following the trail. We're also pulling phone records. Whoever hired Drake communicated with him. We'll find the connection. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. How long will that take? A day, maybe 2. We're prioritizing this, Mrs. Caldwell. Attempted murder for hire is serious. We'll have answers soon. He stood preparing to leave, then paused. I need you to come to the station tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. I'll have the financial records and phone logs ready by then. I'll walk you through everything we've found. I nodded. Okay. Harrison looked at me, his expression softer now, almost sympathetic. Mrs. Caldwell, I want to prepare you. What we're going to show you tomorrow. It's going to be difficult. The person who did this is someone you know, someone close to you. My chest tightened. How do you know that? Because Drake didn't choose you at random. Someone gave him your name, your address, your routine. Someone who knew you well enough to know when you'd be alone. I felt the walls closing in. Harrison put a hand on my shoulder just briefly. We'll get through this. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. He left, and I stood there in Linda's living room staring at the door. Someone close to me. Someone I knew. I thought about my neighbors Linda, the Johnsons down the street, the Martins who brought me casseroles after James died. I thought about former students now grown some with families of their own. I thought about the people at church, the book club I'd joined last year. I went through every name I could think of, every face, every conversation. And then I stopped. There was one person I didn't want to think about. One person my heart refused to suspect. But the thought was there now, quiet and terrible, growing louder with every passing second. The next morning I was getting ready to meet Harrison at 9 when the doorbell rang at 8. I froze my coat, half of my heart pounding. I opened the door. Andrew stood on Linda's porch, but this time everything about him was different from his visit 2 nights ago. His face was pale, almost gray. His eyes were red and swollen like he'd been crying. His hair was disheveled, his jacket wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Mom," he gasped, his voice breaking. "Thank God you're okay." Before I could respond, he stepped forward and pulled me into a tight hug. I stood there, stiff, feeling the small recording device Harrison had given me, pressing against my ribs. I forced myself to relax, to hug him back, to play the part. "Andrew, I'm fine," I said softly. He pulled back his hands, gripping my shoulders. "I just heard. Linda called me. Someone broke into your house, Mom. I can't believe this. Who would do this to you?" I watched him closely. His performance was flawless. The trembling hands, the tears pooling in his eyes, the raw fear in his voice. If I didn't know better, I would have believed every word. "They caught him," I said, carefully following Harrison's script. "The police arrested him yesterday." Sir Andrew's eyes widened. "They did? Who was he?" "I don't know. Some man, a stranger. The police are still investigating." Andrew ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head. "A stranger. That doesn't make sense. Why would a stranger target you? I shrugged. I don't know, honey. Detective Harrison is looking into it. Andrew's jaw tightened. Did he say anything? The guy they arrested? Not yet. Andrew nodded slowly, then looked around. Can I see the house? I need to check the locks, the windows. I won't be able to sleep until I know you're safe. I hesitated, then nodded. Of course. We walked across the street to my house. Andrew moved through each room, methodically checking windows, testing locks, looking into closets. I followed silently, my stomach churning. He wasn't checking for safety. He was looking for evidence, for anything that might connect him to Drake. When we reached the kitchen, Andrew paused. Mom, I need to make a quick call. Work stuff. Do you mind? Go ahead, I said. He stepped into the hallway, pulling out his phone. I stayed in the kitchen listening. His voice was low, barely audible. It's done. Yeah, they got him. No, she doesn't know anything. We just wait. It'll blow over. My hands gripped the counter. A few moments later, Andrew returned, his expression calm. All set. Mom, I really think you should stay with me for a few days. I'm staying with Linda for now, I said. But thank you. He hugged me again at the door. I love you, Mom. I'm so glad you're safe. I love you too, I whispered. And then he was gone. I stood there trembling until Harrison's car pulled up 10 minutes later. He didn't say a word. He just handed me his tablet. On the screen was a bank transfer record, $8,000, from Andrew Caldwell to Vincent Drake. Date, December 15th. I stared at the numbers, the names, the date. My vision blurred. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. Harrison's voice was gentle. I'm sorry, Patricia. The world tilted. My son, my boy, the child I had raised, loved, protected. He had tried to have me hurt. He had paid someone to make sure I was gone. And I had just hugged him. I don't remember how Harrison guided me into the chair. I don't remember Officer Walsh bringing me water. All I remember is the way the room spun, the way my chest caved in, the way $8,000 translated into one horrible truth. My son had paid to have me hurt. Harrison sat across from me, his expression heavy. There's more, he said quietly. I looked up, my vision blurred with tears. More. He slid the tablet toward me again. Text messages between Andrew and Drake. I stared at the screen. The messages were short, cold, efficient. Make sure she's alone. Tonight. No mistakes. My hands trembled. Phone records, Harrison continued. 3 calls between Andrew's number and Drake's burner phone. The first was December 4th, 2 weeks before the break-in. 2 weeks. Andrew had been planning this for 2 weeks. Harrison pulled out another document. We also pulled Andrew's financial records. He's in significant debt, $235,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. What gambling debts? Online poker, sports betting, credit card debt. He's been getting collection calls for months. I shook my head. I didn't know. He never told me. He wouldn't. But here's what matters. Your house is worth $525,000. It's paid off. And according to your will, Andrew is your sole heir. The numbers hit me like a blow. $235,000 in debt, $525,000 in inheritance. I was worth more gone than alive. He needed the money, I whispered. Harrison nodded. Yes. And when Drake was arrested, Andrew panicked. That's why he came this morning. He was trying to figure out how much you knew. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in my kitchen 20 years ago. Andrew was 8 years old, standing on a chair helping me bake cookies. James had just been diagnosed with heart trouble, and Andrew looked up at me with serious eyes. Don't worry, Mom, he'd said. When I grow up, I'll take care of you. I promise. I'd kissed his forehead and told him he was my sweet boy. The memory shattered. I opened my eyes. I gave him everything. I said, my voice breaking. I put him through college. I helped with his first apartment. When he got divorced, I paid his legal fees. I gave him everything. I know, Harrison said, but it wasn't enough. The words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. I wiped my eyes, my hands shaking. What happens now? Harrison leaned forward. We arrest him. Today. We have enough evidence, the money transfer, the phone records, the text messages. Drake is cooperating. He's willing to testify. I nodded slowly, numbly. And then, he'll be charged with conspiracy and attempted harm. If convicted, he's looking at 15 to 25 years in prison. 15 to 25 years. My son. I looked down at my hands at the wedding ring I still wore even though James had been gone for 4 years. I thought about all the birthdays, all the Christmases, all the little moments that had made up a life. And I thought about the fact that my son had been willing to erase all of it for money. I want to be there, I said quietly. Harrison looked up. When you arrest him, I want to see his face. I know this is hard to hear. If you're still with me at this moment, please drop a 1 in the comments. It means the world to me to know you're here. Quick reminder, while this story includes fictionalized elements for storytelling, the emotions and lessons are very real. If this is too difficult to continue, I understand you can stop here. But if you want to know what happens next, stay with me. At 10:45 a.m., I sat in the passenger seat of Harrison's unmarked car parked across the street from Premier Realty on State Street. Through the wide glass windows, I could see Andrew at his desk. He was smiling, gesturing with his hands, talking to a young couple, probably first-time homebuyers. He looked confident, relaxed, normal. He had no idea. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Harrison asked quietly. I nodded, my jaw tight. "I'm sure." Harrison spoke into his radio. "All units in position. Move in." 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of the building. Officer Walsh and 2 other officers stepped out and walked toward the entrance. I watched as they pushed open the glass door and entered the office. Through the window, I saw heads turn. Andrew looked up from his desk, his smile fading. Confusion crossed his face as the officers approached. Harrison got out of the car and I followed, staying on the sidewalk across the street. I could see everything. Andrew stood up slowly, his hands raised slightly, his expression shifting from confusion to fear. Harrison was speaking to him, showing him a badge, a document. Andrew's face went pale. He shook his head, backing up a step. "No," I could see him say, though I couldn't hear the words. "No, there's been a mistake." Officer Walsh moved behind him and pulled Andrew's arms back. The click of the handcuffs was almost audible in my mind. Andrew's client stood frozen, staring. His co-workers came out of their offices, watching in shock. One woman covered her mouth with her hand. Andrew was saying something, pleading, his voice rising. But Harrison didn't respond. He just guided Andrew toward the door. They brought him outside. Andrew stumbled slightly on the curb, his hands cuffed behind his back. And then he saw me. Our eyes met across the street. His face went from pale to ashen. His mouth opened and I saw his lips form a single word. "Mom." I stood there perfectly still, my arms crossed. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at him. Andrew's expression crumbled. "Mom," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Mom, please, this is a mistake. I didn't—" Officer Walsh opened the back door of the patrol car. Harrison placed a hand on Andrew's head and guided him inside. Andrew twisted in the seat, staring out the window at me, his face pressed against the glass. "Mom!" he screamed. "Please!" The door slammed shut. The patrol car pulled away, Andrew's face still visible in the back window, his mouth moving, his eyes desperate. I stood there, watching the car disappear down State Street. Harrison walked over to me. "Are you okay?" I took a breath, my chest tight. "The man in that car isn't my son." I said quietly, "My son died the night he transferred that money. The night he decided I was worth more gone than here." Harrison didn't respond. He just stood beside me as the traffic moved past, as people on the sidewalk whispered and stared as the world kept turning. And I realized in that moment that I was completely alone. At 11:30 a.m., I stood in a small observation room at the Madison Police Department, staring through a one-way mirror. On the other side of the glass, Andrew sat at a metal table, his hands cuffed in front of him. His face was red and puffy, his shoulders hunched. Harrison sat across from him, calm and controlled. Officer Walsh stood by the door. I could hear everything through the speakers mounted on the wall. Harrison laid a folder on the table. "Andrew, we have the bank transfer. $8,000 from your account to Vincent Drake's. We have the text messages. We have the phone records. Drake is cooperating. He's already told us everything." Andrew shook his head, his voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to... You didn't mean for what?" Harrison's voice was steady. "You hired Drake to hurt your mother. You paid him to break into her house, to make it look like an accident. That's what happened, isn't it?" Andrew's face crumbled. "You don't understand. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice." "No." Andrew slammed his cuffed hands on the table. "You don't know what it's like. I owe $235,000. Do you understand loan sharks? Collection agencies. They were threatening me. They said if I didn't pay..." His voice broke. I didn't know what else to do. Harrison leaned forward. "So you decided to hurt your mother?" Andrew's eyes filled with tears. "The house. It's just sitting there. She's 68 years old. She doesn't need all that space. I'm 38. I need it now. I need the money now." I felt my stomach turn. Harrison's expression didn't change. "So you hired Vincent Drake?" Andrew nodded slowly, his head dropping. "I told him to make it look natural. I didn't want her to suffer. I needed her gone." The words hung in the air, cold and final. I pressed my hand against the glass, my breath shallow. Harrison stood up and walked to the mirror. He looked directly at me, even though Andrew couldn't see. "Andrew," Harrison said quietly, "your mother is watching you right now." Andrew's head snapped up. His eyes went wide, staring at the mirror. "Mom!" His voice cracked. "Mom, are you there?" He stood up, stumbling toward the glass, his cuffed hands reaching out. "Mom, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I was desperate, I was scared. Please, Mom, please." His palms pressed against the mirror, his face inches from mine. I could see every tear, every desperate expression. "I love you, Mom. Please don't leave me. I'm your son, please." I stood there perfectly still, staring at him through the glass. And then I spoke, my voice quiet but clear. "I don't have a son. Not anymore." Andrew's face shattered. No, Mom, please." I turned and walked toward the door. Officer Walsh opened it for me. "Mrs. Caldwell." Andrew was screaming now, pounding on the glass. "Mom, please don't go. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I stepped out into the hallway. The door closed behind me, muffling his voice. I walked down the long corridor, past the desks, past the officers who looked up and quickly looked away. I pushed open the front door and stepped outside into the cold December air. Behind me, faintly, I could still hear Andrew's voice echoing through the building. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I just kept walking. 4 months later, in April, the trial began. I sat in the courtroom every single day for 3 weeks in the same seat in the third row, watching as the evidence was laid out piece by piece. The bank transfers, the text messages, the phone records, Drake's testimony. Andrew sat at the defense table in a gray suit, his head down, never once looking back at me. On the third day, Edwin Turner took the stand. He was in a wheelchair now, an oxygen tube in his nose, his hands trembling as he gripped the armrests. But his voice was steady. "I was at the Parkway Motel on December 4th, he said. "I overheard 2 men talking. One of them said a name, Mrs. Caldwell, Kendall Avenue, 68 years old, lives alone. House worth over $500,000. They were planning to hurt her, make it look like an accident. I didn't have proof, so I couldn't go to the police. When I saw her at the pharmacy 2 weeks later, I warned her." The courtroom was silent. Edwin looked directly at me. "I'm glad she listened." After his testimony, I found Edwin in the hallway sitting in his wheelchair. "Mr. Turner," I said quietly. He looked up and a faint smile crossed his face. I knelt beside him. "You saved my life." He nodded slowly. "I did." "Thank you." His eyes were calm. "You're welcome." That was all we said. But it was enough. On April 28th, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Andrew Caldwell was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Vincent Drake received 28 years. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement, I stood up. I looked at Andrew, and for the first time in 4 months, he looked back at me. "I don't have anything to say to you," I said quietly. "You stopped being my son the night you decided I was worth more gone than alive. I hope you find peace in prison, but you won't find forgiveness from me." Andrew's face crumbled, but I turned and walked out before he could respond. In May, I sold the house on Kendall Avenue. I couldn't live there anymore. Too many memories, too much pain. I bought a small condo near Lake Monona with a view of the water. It was quiet, peaceful. I started over. I joined a community center and met a woman named Irene who invited me to a book club. I began painting again, something I hadn't done since James died. Slowly, carefully, I built a new life. And then one morning in late May, my phone rang. It was Detective Harrison. "Patricia," he said gently, "I wanted to let you know. Edwin Turner passed away this morning." I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Thank you for telling me." The funeral was small. Only 8 people attended. I sat in the front row and listened as the pastor spoke about Edwin's service in Vietnam, his daughter Emily, his quiet life. When it was over, I stood and read a short eulogy. "Edwin Turner was a stranger who became a hero," I said. "He saved my life and he asked for nothing in return. I will carry his memory with me for the rest of my days." As I left the cemetery, I looked back at his grave one last time, and I whispered, "Thank you." May turned into June and spring arrived in Madison with a softness I hadn't felt in months. The trees along Lake Monona bloomed with fresh green leaves, and the morning sun sparkled on the water outside my condo. I started each day the same way, coffee on the balcony, watching the sailboats drift by, breathing in the cool air. It was quiet, peaceful, and slowly, carefully, I began to heal. Irene became my closest friend. She was 65, a retired librarian with a sharp wit and a kind heart. She introduced me to Helen, 70, a former nurse who baked the best blueberry muffins I'd ever tasted, and Dorothy, 67, a school counselor who had a laugh that could fill a room. The 4 of us became inseparable. We met every Tuesday for book club at the community center, discussing novels over tea and cookies. On Thursdays, we took a painting class together. I hadn't picked up a brush in years, but something about the colors, the strokes, the quiet focus, it brought me back to life. On Saturdays, we went to the farmer's market downtown, wandering through the stalls, sampling cheeses and fresh bread, talking about everything and nothing. One afternoon in early June, as we sat by the lake eating ice cream, Irene looked at me and said, "You know, Patricia family isn't always blood. It's the people who show up." I felt tears prick my eyes. "You're right," she smiled, "and we're showing up for you." Helen reached over and squeezed my hand. "Always." Dorothy nodded. "You're stuck with us now." I laughed, and it was the first real laugh I'd had in months. It felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Every other week I visited Edwin's grave. I brought flowers, daisies, his favorite according to the pastor, and I sat on the bench nearby talking to him. I told him about the book club, about Irene and Helen and Dorothy, about the painting class. I told him that I was okay, that I was living, and I thanked him over and over for giving me the chance to do so. The days grew warmer, the nights grew longer, and little by little I found myself smiling more, sleeping better, feeling lighter. I planted a small herb garden on my balcony, basil, rosemary thyme. I started volunteering at the community center, reading to children on Wednesday afternoons. I joined a chess club and lost every single game, but I kept coming back. I was building a life. Not the life I had before, but a new one. A smaller one, maybe, but mine. One evening in late June, as I stood on my balcony watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and pink, I realized something. I was happy. Not the kind of happiness I'd felt before, the kind that came from Andrew's laughter or James's hand in mine. This was quieter, steadier, earned. By the end of June, I had a routine. Small things. Simple things, my own things. I was 68 years old and I was learning how to live again. And then 10 years later, I received a letter from the parole board. I was 78 years old. My hair was silver. My hands moved a little slower, but I was still here, still living, still painting with Irene and Helen and Dorothy every Thursday. And then one morning in March, I received a letter from the Wisconsin Department of Corrections. It was a notice from the parole board. Andrew Caldwell was eligible for early release. His parole hearing was scheduled for April 15th. I stared at the letter for a long time, my chest tightening. Then I walked to my closet and pulled down a small cardboard box from the top shelf. Inside were 47 letters, all unopened, all from Andrew. One for every few months over the past 10 years. I had never read them. I had never responded. But I kept them. I sat down at my kitchen table and one by one I opened them. Year 1. The letters were angry, bitter, blaming. You did this to me, Mom. You put me in here. You could have forgiven me, but you chose revenge. Year 2. The tone shifted. Bargaining. Excuses. I was sick. I had a gambling addiction. It was a disease. I wasn't in my right mind. You have to understand that. Year 3. Manipulation. Religious appeals. I found God in here, Mom. Jesus forgives. Why can't you? The Bible says we must forgive those who sin against us. Don't you believe in redemption? Year 5. Desperation. Self-pity. I'm dying in here, Mom. Every day is torture. The walls are closing in. Don't you care? Don't you love me anymore? Year 8. Rage. Pure unfiltered rage. You're the monster, not me. You sent your own son to rot in prison. What kind of mother does that? You're heartless. I read every single letter, and when I was done, I sat back and stared at the pile in front of me. 47 letters. 10 years. Thousands of words. Not once did he say, I'm sorry I tried to hurt you. Not once did he take responsibility. Not once did he acknowledge what he had done. I called Irene. She came over within the hour and I showed her the letters. She read a few, then set them down, her face hard. Patricia, she said quietly, he hasn't changed. No, I said, he's learned patience, not remorse. Irene looked at me. What are you going to do? I took a breath. I'm going to that hearing. She nodded. Good, and we're coming with you. On the morning of April 15th, I woke early. I dressed carefully in a black suit, the one I'd worn to James's funeral all those years ago. I fastened James's watch around my wrist, feeling the weight of it, the memory. I put the box of letters in my bag, each one a piece of evidence. Irene, Helen, and Dorothy picked me up at 8. We drove to the hearing in silence, but their presence was enough. I wasn't alone. We sat in the waiting room as other families went in and out. Some cried. Some looked hopeful. I felt nothing but resolve. And then my name was called. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked into the hearing room. Andrew sat at a table in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked older, grayer, thinner. His eyes were hollow. When he saw me, his face went pale. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I sat down in the chair across from the parole board. Andrew wanted his freedom. I was going to make sure he didn't get it. The hearing room was small and sterile with fluorescent lights and a long table where 5 parole board members sat. I took my seat, the box of letters on my lap. Irene, Helen, and Dorothy sat behind me. A door opened and Andrew was brought in by 2 corrections officers. He was 48 now, but he looked older. His hair was thinning and gray. His face was hollow. His orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame. He shuffled to the table and sat down. And then he saw me. His eyes widened. For a moment, he just stared. The chair of the parole board spoke. Mr. Caldwell, you're here to petition for early release. You've served 10 years of a 22-year sentence. Do you have anything to say? Andrew cleared his throat. Yes, thank you. I've changed. I've spent the last 10 years working on myself. Anger management, therapy. I've studied the Bible. I've found God. I'm not the same man I was. He glanced at me, pleading. I've made terrible mistakes, but I've learned from them. I'm ready to contribute to society again. The board members nodded. Then the chair looked at me. Mrs. Caldwell, you have the right to speak. Would you like to address the board? I stood slowly holding the box. Yes, I would. I walked to the front and set the box on the table. This box contains 47 letters. My son sent them over the past 10 years. I never responded, but I kept every one. I opened the box and pulled out letters. In year 1, he wrote, "You did this to me, Mom. You could have forgiven me, but you chose revenge." I set it down and picked up another. In year 3, I've found God. Jesus forgives. Why can't you... Another. In year 8, you're the monster, not me. I looked at the board. 47 letters, 10 years. Not once did he say, "Mom, I'm sorry I tried to hurt you." Not once did he take responsibility. Not once did he acknowledge what he did. I looked at Andrew. His face was red, his jaw clenched. He says he's changed, but these letters prove otherwise. He's learned patience, manipulation, but not remorse. I turned back to the board. Don't let him out. He will hurt someone else. Andrew shot to his feet. You're selfish, he shouted. I'm your son. You're supposed to love me. You're supposed to forgive me. The corrections officers grabbed him, pulling him back. Andrew thrashed, his face twisted with rage. You're a terrible mother. I hate you. Do you hear me? I hate you. They dragged him toward the door as he screamed, his voice echoing down the hallway. The room fell silent. The chair looked at her colleagues, then back at me. Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell. We'll deliberate now. 10 minutes later, they returned. Parole denied. I walked out of the prison into the April sunlight. Irene, Helen, and Dorothy were waiting by the car. We drove home in silence, but it was a peaceful silence. That evening, I planted tulips in the small garden bed outside my condo. Tulips were James's favorite. I was 78 years old, and for the first time in a decade, I was truly free. They say blood is thicker than water, but blood tried to hurt me. Water, snow, saved me. I've had a lot of time to think about that, about what happened, about the man who warned me, about the son who betrayed me, about the women who became my family. I was 68 years old when my son hired someone to harm me. I'm 78 now. 10 years have passed since that December night, and I've learned more in this decade than in all the years before. I learned that family isn't who you're born to. It's who stays. It's who shows up. It's who sits with you in the hard moments and doesn't ask for anything in return. Irene, Helen, and Dorothy are my family now. They're my daughters in every way that matters. I learned that trust isn't given. It's earned. And once it's broken, it can never be repaired. I learned that it's never too late to start over, to build something new, to find peace. I think about Edwin Turner often, the stranger who saved my life and asked for nothing. I visit his grave every month and I whisper, "Thank you. Wherever you are, thank you." I wake up every morning to the sound of birds and the shimmer of sunlight on Lake Monona. I drink my coffee on the balcony. I paint, I read, I laugh with my friends. I'm 78 years old. I was betrayed by blood. I was saved by a stranger. I lost a son. I gained daughters. I survived evil. I found grace. Every morning I wake up and see the lake sparkling outside my window. I'm alive, not just breathing, living. Those footprints in the snow revealed the truth, and the truth painful as it was set me free. If you're listening to my story, you might be thinking, how could a mother survive something like this? How do you move forward when your own child betrays you? Let me tell you what I've learned from family drama stories like mine, because these things happen more often than you'd think. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the warning signs. I saw Andrew's desperation, his strange behavior, his insistence on shoveling that snow, but I didn't want to believe my son could hurt me. Trust your instincts. God gave them to you for a reason. Edwin Turner was a stranger, but God sent him to me like an angel in that pharmacy. I believe God works through people, sometimes people we least expect. He saved my life through a dying veteran who had nothing to gain. That's grace. These family drama stories teach us that blood doesn't define family. Love does. Loyalty does. Irene, Helen, and Dorothy became my daughters not because we share DNA, but because they chose to stay. Grandma's stories like mine aren't always about happy endings. Sometimes they're about survival, about finding strength you didn't know you had, about choosing to live when everything inside you wants to give up. So here's my advice. If you're living through your own family drama stories, know this: you are not alone. God sees you. He hasn't forgotten you. It's never too late to start over. I was 68 when my world fell apart. I'm 78 now, and I'm happier than I've been in years. To anyone listening to these grandma stories on this channel, protect your peace, set boundaries, and remember, the people who truly love you will never make you choose between your safety and their comfort. Thank you for listening. These grandma stories matter. Your story matters. May God bless you and keep you safe. Amen. Thanks for sticking around. Drop a 2 in the comments if you're ready to continue. Fair warning, the next part contains fictional elements added for educational storytelling. If that's not what you're looking for, you're free to leave and find content that better matches your interests.